Ryan Reynolds here for, I guess, my 100th Mint commercial. No, don't. No. I mean, honestly, when I started this, I thought I only have to do like 4 of these. I mean, it's unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month. How are there still people paying 2 or 3 times that much? I'm sorry, I shouldn't be victim blaming here. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/save. Whenever you're ready.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See details.
The nice thing about having a business partner was the days that I thought we were going to be millionaires were usually the days she thought we were going to go bankrupt. And then we would flip flop. So it's like I would cheer her up and then she would cheer me up.
Making my kids' beds is not my favorite thing in the entire world, and I think every parent would agree with me. But who would have thought that that very problem could lead to a multi-million-dollar business? Well, that's exactly what happened for our guest today, Betsy Mikesell of the Beddy's Company. She's going to give us her background story and how she took a problem of her own and turned it into a thriving business, and even discovered a lot of problems along the way that could be solved for parents across the globe. So get ready to take some notes because we're going to dive all into building a company and a brand with Betsy Mikesell. Let's get to it. Class is officially in session. Hello, Betsy. Welcome to Millionaire University. So happy to have you on here today. You're joining us from beautiful Tennessee. Thanks for coming on.
Yes. Thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
Well, it's going to be a great conversation. You are one of those business owners who has just done some incredible things. And you and I met years ago when I had you on my podcast. And I'm so delighted that we get to share the Beddy's story here on Millionaire University.
Yeah.
And I'm betting there's some people here that are going to even want to just go buy the product by the time we're done talking. So
that'd be awesome.
Phenomenal. Yeah, that'll be a bonus.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Why don't you give us a little bit of a backstory into even just you as an entrepreneur? We are obviously going to be talking about the Beddy's story, but you as Betsy Mikesell, did you have much of an entrepreneurial background, or was this really your first step in?
Well, I would say no, but then when I look back at all my things, I was like, oh, I forgot I did that, or I forgot I did that. So I don't know. When you think of that, it's like, to me, I think of somebody who's done like a really cool big business. And I'm like, I think that this is just how I was as a kid growing up. Like I used to work for my neighbors. Well, I had my little babysitting business, and I made like the babysitting box. Like I wanted to be the best babysitter that everyone always wanted to call, And then I started doing hair and I loved doing hair. It was like, and I worked for myself out of my home. It was great. I loved it. And I didn't even ever want to start a bedding business. Like that was never something I thought I want to start until I had my twins with their bunk beds, and there was no solution for making a bunk bed. And so I remember just making my own version of it. And I would tell all my clients about it. I'm like, how do you make these bunk beds? Like, what are you doing? And they're like, we just throw a blanket on top. I'm like, oh my gosh, why is nobody else complaining? Why am I the vocal one about making bunk beds? So then I just decided to make my own version of what Beddy's is today. And then I would tell my clients about it. I'm like, well, I made this. And they're like, Betsy, that's genius. You should patent it and start a business. I'm like, really? Like other people would want this? So truly, when Beddy's started, it was not to think of like, let's start some giant business. It was really like, I need a solution for my kids' bedding. And even when I convinced my business partner to start with me, it was like, I told her, I'm like, don't go back to college, because if she went back to college, then we wouldn't have our lunch dates anymore. So I'm like, let's start a business. And she's like, well, what business? I'm like, well, we could do the zippered bedding. It'll be a fun hobby. We can go to business lunches. Like that's what got me into business is the lunches. So anyways, that's kind of how it started. And then once we got into it, once we needed a patent for the bedding and we realized how expensive it was, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's like, go big or go home. Getting the patent was super expensive. And then we went and visited for a couple of years, just different manufacturers around the US. And it was so hard to find, like, there's no more manufacturing things here in the US, like, especially for fabrics, like you have to get it overseas. So then once we had gone through all of that, trying to find manufacturing, our first manufacturer, they wanted $250,000. And if you can imagine, we were starting a hobby that turned into a $250,000 hobby, and we didn't have that kind of money. So yeah, when we decided that we're going to go for it, it was like, go big or go home kind of a thing.
I love that. So it sounds like, I think maybe all of us have different definitions of an entrepreneur. And we maybe look at it as like, for me, back in the day, I used to think entrepreneurs are people who can't hold down jobs. And so they just have to go
Oh my gosh.
and find odd ways to make money.
Oh, okay. The fact that you say that is hilarious because I used to watch The Bachelor, and whenever they would say they were an entrepreneur, I would tell my husband, I'm like, that means they don't have a job. Like, is that terrible? Anytime I ever judge or say something like that, it bites me in the butt. So it's like, but that was the truth. Cause I'm like, what is it? What's your job? I'm like, saying you're an entrepreneur just means you don't have a job probably.
Yeah. It just means you're non-committal. And yeah, he's not going to win The Bachelor because, you know, whatever. I guess The Bachelor is the one choosing the girl. But yeah, that was my understanding. And it took me years in looking back, kind of hindsight, the way you just did, to see, oh, I've always been an entrepreneur. I did the babysitting boxes too.
You did?
We grew up on Babysitters Club. Hello. We have the whole vision of a business, not just a little thing.
We were going to be the best. I wanted to be the best, you know?
Absolutely.
And I wanted to have fun while I was doing it too. So it's like, we need to include fun things for these kids.
Yep.
So
yeah. So I was right there with you. And you start to look back and you're like, oh, I did have tendencies to be an entrepreneur. It doesn't sound like you have gone from a traditional 9 to 5. Even doing hair was you pursuing a little bit of an alternative thing. And you may sit here and say, I'm not the inspiring guest to come on here, but you are preaching to the right audience because these are people who are like, heck yeah, I want a business so I can have lunches and write-offs. And I don't, we're over here saying, don't go to college because then you'll just end up with debt or you'll learn a bunch of skills, but let's like just get into it and build something that we can start having fun with right now. So I actually love your backstory.
Can I tell you another thing? This is just me just sharing but I am the only person in my family who is not a college graduate.
Wow.
And I didn't realize all these things till someone's like, who's the black sheep in your family? I'm like, I don't know. I don't think we have one. And then I was like, wait, it's me.
I'm the problem. It's me.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, except not. So, and I'm willing to bet you're probably one of the more successful in terms of business. I don't know.
No, I don't know. But I love what I do. So we're happy. So it's good.
Yep. So we've talked a little bit about the introduction of Beddy's. And so let's dive into that a little bit deeper. You recognized a problem that you yourself were having. This is where most really, really powerful businesses are born from, is you trying to solve a problem for yourself and then recognizing, wait a minute, there's a need here. So can we talk a little bit more about that timeline? And you discover this, bring on a business partner for business lunches, and you're now a huge company that's very, very well known. So let's go into that a little bit.
Thank you. So, okay, I stopped it where we needed $250,000. And so you guys, this is where my stories. Okay. Shark Tank came into town. So I was like, duh, Angie, all we need to do is go to Shark Tank. We're going to show them this idea. They're going to love it. And we're going to get $250,000. So she's like, okay, I'm going to hold the fort down here. You go down and you audition and see how it goes. So I go down. It was in Vegas. It's like 6-hour drive. I show Shark Tank. And when you do the auditions, you're not meeting with the sharks. You're meeting with like their producer people. Anyways, I show him and he's like smiling the whole time, probably thinking I'm an idiot. And he's like, no, that's a really good idea. And he's like, but you haven't sold anything. Like the judges are going to eat you alive. And I was like, really? I'm like, but the thing is, that's why I need the money, so I can get this business going. And he's like, yeah, you have to have sales behind you. So I'm like, well, my only other thought was that maybe we could do a Kickstarter. So I'm like, okay, if we do a Kickstarter, if we can get like $100,000 from Kickstarter, then I'm like, then we'll know it's not just us and our friends and family who want the product. It's like a really good idea. And also going to banks to get money and loans. Like they're like, oh, you have a women's business. You can get women's business loans. BS. Because banks want your first and second child and then your house. And then they might give you $20,000. Truly, That's like yes, it was terrible. And I'm like, okay, so it made more sense for my business partner and I. We're like, okay, if we can get $100,000 on Kickstarter, then we'll each take $75,000 out on our home equity line. And that's how we're going to fund that first order. So we ended up going on Kickstarter. We had posted a video on Facebook and I had like 500 friends. My friend had 500 friends on Facebook, and it got like 3,000 views. And we're like, oh my gosh, this is going viral. This video is viral.
I mean, for its time, it was, right?
I mean, we thought it was. And then it had like 15,000 views. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And all that video was doing was collecting emails because we had no website to sell product. We had nothing. So anyways, once we got all those emails and then the Kickstarter started, we ended up doing $108,000 in like 40 days, which at that time, I feel like was pretty huge for us because it's your friends and family are only like so deep. Like then you have to start getting like real customers. So to this day, our Kickstarter people are still like our people, like we always try to on her birthday to send out an email to give like a really good discount or something for Beddy's. But I don't know. I still to this day, I'm like, oh my gosh, people are like, if you could go back and redo everything, I would still do everything the same probably. But I also don't know that I would redo it because you know how much work is involved. But when you're in it, you just keep plugging along to the next thing,
Yeah. Well, even when you mentioned this was going to be a hobby business and now we're talking $250,000.
Right.
What was like the thing? What was the vision behind, I'm willing to actually drive down to Vegas and go to Shark Tank. I'm willing to do a Kickstarter. Things that you had never seen happen before that you were literally having to do as you went. Where did that drive come from? Like, what was the big thing?
I was naive. Like, I honestly thought, oh, I just need to go to Shark Tank. That's all I need to do. And they're going to think it's such a good idea because my mom thought it was a good idea. My dad thought it was like, like that's where I guess family can also make you more confident in yourself than you probably should be. But it was good. Like, I remember actually before I left for Shark Tank, my mom's like, Betsy, this is a really good idea. Just stick to it. It's going to be hard. And I'm like, why are you saying this is going to be hard? It's going to be easy. Everyone's going to know it's a good idea, But that stuck to me because there were so many hard times and so many, like every time you thought like, oh my gosh, this is going to be big. We're going to be millionaires. And then literally the next day, it's like, we're going bankrupt. I don't think this is ever going to make it. So the nice thing about having a business partner was it was like the days that I thought we were going to be millionaires were usually the days she thought we were going to go bankrupt. And then we would flip flop. So it's like I would cheer her up and then she would cheer me up. So yeah, I think it was being naive. I think that's just.
Yeah. Delusional confidence is what I like to call it.
Yes.
It's so nice when you're starting and you don't know the amount of work that you are looking at and you just take one step at a time. I feel like that is a challenge nowadays if we have access to so much information, and it's what makes it very challenging. It was almost easier to not know what you didn't know and you just go, right? And nowadays people see, and especially if you've had success and then you're trying to do success again, you're almost just tired and you're like, I don't want to do it again. I know what it took. It's like birthing a baby, right? It's a whole thing. It's not overnight.
Yeah. So it is truly like, I didn't know what I was doing. And I didn't ever try to fake that I knew what I was doing. And so I think the fact that people saw like, oh, these sweet girls, they are starting a business and they don't know what they're doing. So I'm going to just like offer a little help or a little helpful advice. And then, we ate it up. Anyone that would give us any kind of advice or help, we were just like, oh my gosh, thank you so much. And then people would want to help us again. Maybe because we were appreciative. I don't know. But we were super lucky with people like mentors that just showed up and then Google. Like, cannot tell you the amount of times we had to be like, what is a shipping broker? After our product was already on the water on the way to our fulfillment center.
How are we going to actually get this to us? It's build the ship as you're flying it, right? Or build the plane as you're flying it. Yeah. Exactly.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So after you got that initial Kickstarter and you mentioned, there's a lot of ups and downs as you're going. So for anybody listening, there's so many different businesses you can build, but let's talk specifically about building a company like this where you have end product. This is pre-social media being what it was even today, right? We're talking about Facebook friends was like your reach. So what did it look like to scale this up after that initial launch? How did you keep it growing?
So this is like at the very beginning, and it wasn't even called like influencer marketing, but I remember telling my business partner, I'm like, we just need to find hairdressers because I was a hairdresser at the time. And I felt like as a hairdresser, I told everyone what vacuum was best, what wash rags they should be using. I didn't sell these products, but I would have one client come in and they're like, oh, you got to try this vacuum. So I try the vacuum and then I tell the next person and the next person, So I'm like, we've got to find the hairdressers of the world. Like, where are they? And then that's when I remember there were a couple YouTubers and they were on Instagram and I was on Instagram just barely at that point. And Carly Stiles is one of them. And I remember reaching out to her and I'm like, could I send you some bedding if you would want to share it? And she's like, sure, and so I had no money to offer her. In fact, the bedding that I was giving her, I felt like I was literally taking out $250 out of my personal account to send it to her because you don't realize how much debt is involved. Like I was working full time as a hairdresser just to get Beddy's going as I'm running Beddy's at the same time, Mm-hmm. So it was me just like kind of reaching out to these people. And who had a following. And then I remember Carly posted about it, and her sister Kaylee, sister-in-law, they both posted about it, and it shut down our website, which I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so crazy that like people can send this much traffic, So we got in the influencer marketing game really early and really lucky because, again, like starting out with our finances, which were zero back then, I couldn't afford the influencer marketing because we didn't even pay a commission. I mean, like, I think back to these people who shared for us, and they just shared to be good, kind, nice people,
Mm-hmm. But since then, you also now have upped the ante on that. You have a really great influencer program, right? People are getting paid affiliate commission.
Yes.
Would you say that's your number one growth tool is affiliate marketing?
It was in the beginning. It's not now. We perform better on Google Ads and stuff now, but Google Ads wouldn't perform if we hadn't had years of influencer marketing because it's just that product that needs to be shown and explained. And it's like, there has to be that human touch behind it because like I can share how Beddy's works and then you still have to answer 10,000 questions after to your audience who are like, well, wait, where's the bottom sheet? Wait, what about the top sheet? How does this hook onto your bed? Or,
Yeah. We didn't even really fully address what the product is. You can probably figure it out if you've listened, but we skipped right over that, right? It was the solution to the bunk bed, but let's talk about what that is because you also had the advantage of unique product. There was nothing else out there like this. So you got the patent, which was expensive, but let's explain what Beddy's are.
Shopify has already taken the cash register online, helping millions sell billions around the world. But did you know that Shopify can do the same thing at your retail store? Give your point of sale system a serious upgrade with Shopify. Shopify POS is your command center for your retail store. From accepting payments to managing inventory, Shopify has everything you need to sell in person. With Shopify, you get a powerhouse selling partner that effortlessly unites your in-person and online sales into one source of truth. Track every sale across your business in one place and know exactly what's in stock. Connect with customers in line and online. Shopify helps you drive store traffic with plug-and-play tools built for marketing campaigns from TikTok to Instagram and beyond. Get hardware that fits your business. Take payments by smartphone. Plus, Shopify's award-winning help is there to support your success every step of the way. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/MU, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/MU to take your retail business to the next level today. Shopify.com/MU.
Let's talk real estate, Millionaire University. We all know the mantra, buy low, sell high. Sounds simple, right? But timing the market is not always easy. Here's where things get a little interesting. Fundrise, our sponsor, sees the current high interest rate environment as an opportunity. Their flagship fund is gearing up to expand its billion-dollar real estate portfolio. Now, I'm not a real estate guru, but I know a potentially smart move when I see one. Fundrise is making it possible for you to add their flagship fund to your portfolio with as little as $10. Want to explore this potential wealth-building avenue? Visit fundrise.com/MU. That's fundrise.com/MU. Diversification is key. Adding real estate to your portfolio could be a step towards that millionaire-minded approach we're always talking about. Remember, every millionaire journey starts with informed decisions. Do your research and see if Fundrise aligns with your wealth-building strategy. Carefully consider the investment objectives, risks, charges, and expenses of the Fundrise flagship fund before investing. This and other information can be found in the fund's prospectus at fundrise.com/flagship. This is a paid advertisement.
So I would say Beddy's is kind of like a sleeping bag and a comforter had a baby. So it goes on, if you imagine this, you're putting the whole unit on like you would a fitted sheet. And then the sides zip all the way around and around the bottom. And then when you open that zipper, the fitted sheet is already in place. And then the top section is like, it's like getting into a sleeping bag. But then what's cool about it is it has these comfort panels, and the comfort panels extend out. So it feels like you're sleeping in traditional bedding. And it also covers the zipper, so you don't feel like you're like sleeping with a zipper at night. And then it's just more comfortable than a sleeping bag because sleeping bags are like more confined, where this is, a lot of people still sleep zipped up, but it's meant to sleep either way, zipped up or unzipped, just like traditional bedding.
So cool. I remember getting these for my kids for Christmas one year, and I was more excited about them than the kids. They were like, cool, a new comforter. And I was like, they're Beddy's. You're going to love them. And they got excited because I was so excited. It was just such a different thing. And it really did simplify and make life easy, because if you're a parent, one of the most frustrating things is getting your kids to make their beds and it actually look like the bed is made. So I love the concept. Can we talk a little bit about that too, with product market fit and what you knew your audience right away, right? Like you knew you needed to get with the hair salon or the hairdressers because you knew they were going to talk about it. But most of the people coming in were moms. They were women who were going to have this pain point. So that's probably been huge in just knowing your audience. Do you feel like you had to do much deep dive into the marketing research?
I should have. I learned a lot through Kickstarter though. So a couple things I learned through Kickstarter were people were wanting it for bigger beds. So we had only started Kickstarter with twin and full. I thought bunk beds is it. Like that's all we need them for. And then people were wanting it for queen size. And so we're like, oh crap. Okay, let's add queen size to our Kickstarter. Well, they sent us over a sample of queen size. And I didn't have a queen size bed at the time, but my business partner, Angie, did. Anyways, Angie tries it that night. And the next morning she's like, Betsy, we are on to something. Keep in mind, we've already started our Kickstarter, so it's a good thing. She's like, this was the most incredible bedding to sleep in. I'm like, really? She's like, yeah, because it keeps your bedding in place so that your partner isn't stealing it from you. She's like, this is what you need for trailers and RVs. And I'm like, oh my gosh, how did we not even think of that, you know? So then this just opened up the market that it's good for all beds, not just bunk beds. It's good for two people in a bed, you know, to sleeping together. It's good for RVs. And then once our Kickstarter funded, all of our orders went out, right? That's a funny story in itself. I'll have to tell that in just a minute. But one of the first emails I got was from a woman whose child had sensory processing disorder. And I have never heard of that before. And what she said is she's like, you don't understand, but for 7 years, I had to hold my son tightly to get him to go to sleep. She's like, when I put Beddy's on, I zipped him in and he went right to sleep and stayed asleep the whole night. And I'm like, oh my gosh, here I was inventing this for an easy way to make a bunk bed. That's it, you know? And then to find out that it's like actually life-changing for her and that her son can go to sleep without her having to hold him tightly. You know, like so cool that it can like help other people.
Yeah.
So through that Kickstarter process and through hearing emails from other people, that's like when we learned so many different things that like it was good for, you know? And it's funny because when we were first creating it, my first beddys that I made was just with cotton fabric, just like their traditional bedding. And I put it on Boston's bed, my son, Boston, and I put it on his bed. And the next morning I went up and he had brought his minky blanket up into bed with him. I'm like, no, the whole reason I got this is so that it's clean and it looks nice. Like you just need this. You don't need the extra. He's like, but mom, I like that cozy minky fabric. And I'm like, okay. So then Angie and I are talking. We're like, our goal for this whole thing was to make bedding for our kids. So we're like, maybe we add this minky fabric to our bedding. And I'm like, okay, let's try this. So we did it. And the minky fabric is still our top seller to this day. Isn't that wild? But it was like, again, my son who was so finicky, and turns out he came up with a good thing.
Yeah, it turns out he's probably made the company millions of dollars because of his insistence on the minky, right?
Shh, don't tell him that.
I love that. It proves that there has to be an ongoing conversation with your audience, with your customers, because there is so many things you could have not possibly foreseen. You had a great idea and you saw the benefit to people, but then you started to expand. I wanted to ask you along those lines, as you talk about customization with Minky, how long did it take you to have a pretty substantial variety in terms of fabrics or colors or things like that when you did that initial shipment? And then I want you to go back to your story on your first shipment that you sent out too.
Okay, so it took years, I would say. I mean, we started out with 4 colors. We had navy, gray, white, and then we called it Perfectly Mismatched, which was like a colorful one. So that was like in September. And then we were able to use some of the fabric from Perfectly Mismatched. It had 4 different fabrics with it. So we could make each of those into its own bed too, because we had already had the fabric made. And then we gradually brought on I would say we hung around 10 SKUs for like a long time. And even still, it's funny because our top 2 selling, until probably maybe a year ago, but the navy and gray were our top performers. Like they were always number 1 and 2. And now they're still in the top 10, but crazy for 10 years ago, you know, that they're still that high up there. But it's just so expensive because you think so for us to do, that was the very, very minimum was to get $250,000 worth. And then you get the product sent to you, you pay for it. We had no terms. So that means like as soon as we need the product, we have to pay for it in full for them to ship it. It takes them 6 weeks to get it to us, right? And then once we get it, we start selling it. And then 2 months later, we need another order of $250,000. And I still hadn't sold all the product that we had, but we still had to make our next order because it takes 6 months to make it. Anyway, long story short, we're like, crap, what do we do now? So we actually brought on a neighbor who loved the idea. And he's like, I want to be part of Beddy's. We're like, cool, because we actually need money too. So he funded our second order. And then after that, it was just selling, like, and I remember, gosh, like 4 years in, I remember talking to my CPA. I'm like, when will we start like feeling like we're making money? Because every dime that came in, when you're a growing business and product, it just has to be dumped back into the company to buy more product and more products. So it was like, I want to say 5 years before we even really paid ourselves decent enough to like feel like you're surviving.
Yeah. And so then even longer after that to feel like you might have this business that's generating a lot of cash, but the investment back into product, I think that's a really easy trap that people fall into. I know we did when we sold physical product on Amazon. It was like, oh, wait, we're supposed to set aside and keep reinvesting, and we really can't take a profit for a while. It's crazy.
Like millions. We were making millions and I didn't have a dollar. Like, I'm like, I'm still working as a hairdresser and we can't, it was wild.
Yeah,
so I think now when I hear that people are like these $1 million businesses, I'm like, well, that doesn't really mean a whole lot,
Yeah. Let me know when you are a personal millionaire.
Yeah, it's true. But I didn't know that until being in business myself.
Yeah.
So, but it's like been a fun journey. Oh my gosh, it came out when we got our first shipment.
Yep.
So we get our first shipment. First of all, it's headed to my personal house. Beddy's is a big product. And so there's no way it would have fit in my garage and my basement and my family room combined. Like they're just big pieces. And then there's thousands of them. So somebody sent me a Facebook message. I don't even know this woman. And she's like, who's doing your shipping and fulfillment? And I'm like, I am, like, me and my business partner. She's like, honey, that's not going to fit in your garage. And I'm like, really? Like, thank goodness she messaged me, because then she's like, I have a guy that you should talk to. So she introduced me to her friend. We went over to his place and it would have never fit in my garage. Like, what was I thinking? Honestly, this is like, and he was wonderful. And it was also very expensive. Like, I think to ship each Beddy's was about $48 or something. It was expensive.
Wow.
So you think of like, we've just put all of our money into this product and now you're wanting me to spend $48 per bed to ship to these people who've already paid, So we took every address within like a couple hour radius of us, and we just drove them around to everyone's house and hand delivered their Beddy's.
Wow.
And I would be so embarrassed now to just go, you just ordered, here's your order, because we can't afford to ship it to you.
Yeah, but your customers are probably thinking, wow, what treatment. We will always order. They're going to deliver it to our door. They probably loved it.
Oh, gosh. It was actually so cool, though. It was so fun to meet the people. There was a lady whose son had Down syndrome. And she's like, will you please come in and just put it on his bed for him? We're like, okay. So we go in. And so it's like we firsthand got to watch him get in. And so we put the bedding on him and he gets in and he's like, I love it. I love it. Like, he was so excited. So we're like, we got to experience these like customers using it for the first time. So while it was embarrassing that we couldn't afford to ship, it was really cool to meet the people, see them use it. And like, there were some exciting times in that too,
Yeah. You have a really powerful story of resilience, of just continuing to hit roadblocks and finding a solution. And so many people pretty early on in your journey would have stopped and been like, this is way too much. Who do I think I am? Which requires a lot of confidence. I know you said it was kind of delusional confidence. You just didn't know and you just kept proceeding forward. But was there something going on inside of you that just knew there was something bigger at play here that kept you moving forward too?
Gosh, I guess maybe I was just born with this, that I just kept thinking, I can do it. I can do it. I can do the next thing. Okay. Like, maybe I didn't look super far. I just kind of looked, okay, what's my next step is probably more of what I did. Because I remember, this is another thing. We went and visited our factory. We would go actually about 3 times a year to go visit our factories. And one of the times we decided to go see the Great Wall. And I remember like standing on the Great Wall and looking out, and I'm like, oh my gosh, Beddy's is successful. This is really cool. Like, I've never been across the world and to a foreign place like this. And then just to experience it, I'm like, Beddy's is what brought us here, And I remember thinking, I'm like, it was the one time that I felt like, I was like, good job, Betsy. Good job, Angie. Like, I remember telling my business partner, Angie, I'm like, we got us here. Like, Beddy's got us here. This is so cool. Because for so long, it was just like, I just looked at, okay, we have to get this. Okay, we have to get this next number. We have to get this next order. It was just the next thing that we had to do instead of like looking back and seeing, wow, that was like a lot that we did, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I love it. It's so inspiring to hear. And I want to actually address something I didn't plan to ask you about, but you brought it up a little bit with getting funding as a female entrepreneur. There is a totally different world out there for female entrepreneurs than there are for males. So have there been any other challenges aside from funding as being female entrepreneurs?
I don't think so. I feel like it's almost like people are nicer. Like they want to help you. I think that they're excited for you. So I felt like it was more like people thought it was cool and were like, how can I help? Like there were a ton of guy business owners that wanted to help us too, you know? So I didn't feel like there was challenges as much as there were like really cool opportunities, you know? And like it's so funny because like there were like some female CEO awards or whatever. And I remember being like, I don't want a female CEO award. I want just the CEO award. Like I just wanted to be like, let's just all be cool CEOs together. Like it doesn't need to be just for females, although that's really cool that they do that. But yeah. So I feel like if anything, they're trying to give females more opportunities. I feel like the whole banking thing, they say female-owned business, they're lying. That's not really anything. Like they still want your first child and your business and your successes. It wasn't any easier for banking for us.
That's good to know. What else would you say are some of the bigger hurdles? I know we've talked about them as we've gone through the timeline a little bit. Yeah. But even in scaling, at what point did you recognize, I mean, I'm sure you brought people on as you were going, but what point did you recognize, okay, this is something that can kind of run itself? And how did you address that of being able to let go a little bit and have the company become a company and not your side hustle project?
Yeah, I know this is terrible, but like things happen in your life for a reason. And I know this is one of it. I had so many business mentors tell me, you can't work in your business, you need to work on your business. And that's easier said than done when you're talking about your baby. Like, no, I will be involved and I will make all of these decisions. Thank you. But I was 2020, we've got COVID happening and our business, I was just like, okay, let's like cut these orders in half because I don't know what's happening with everything. Like, are we going to get more orders in? And then everyone's stuck at home. So everyone's stuck in bed. They're cleaning their houses. They're redoing things. And so Beddy's starts to we were killing it through COVID. And I felt so lucky. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so awesome. And we were able to work from home because normally we were in the office every day. Well, then August, and I don't know if this is a part of the hot podcast that you want me to tell, but it's kind of a big part of the business too, is August of 2020, my husband and I and my twin boys were all in a small plane crash. So I was involved in every detail. And then this happened. And my husband, same thing. My husband was doing all the shipping and fulfillment. The craziest thing that happened is the week before that plane crash, he had trained another guy on everything he's done. Like never has he ever trained anyone on anything, but for some reason he trains this guy on everything he's done. Well, my husband ended up being in the hospital for a long time. So that meant that I'm going back and forth through the hospital every single day. Like I couldn't be in the business anymore. So my employees, my business partner took off. Like I was probably dampering all of their, like they were better without me, honestly, because I was probably getting so involved in all these things. So when you're like, when do you learn to let go and let it run? It was like I was forced to do that, you know, because of the plane crash. And then finding a place coming back was like, it was tricky. It was like a tricky thing. And then I saw how well everything was going. I'm like, why am I involved in all these things too? And over the years through running Beddy's, we were restructuring every year. Like as your business doubles, you have to restructure everything. And so it was always being restructured. But then after the plane crash and we saw how all those things worked, we restructured again. And I wasn't in those day-to-day things. And then we ended up moving out to Tennessee and I've become even less involved in the day-to-day stuff. And my business partner, she's the co-CEO, we're co-CEOs together, and she's a little bit more involved in things that I used to be involved in. And then she's kind of shifted out of some of these things too. So it's just like a ever evolving thing. Like, I don't think that you can, I don't know. It's almost like yearly you have to kind of like, okay, where are we at? What do we need to restructure? What's working and what's not, kind of a thing.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of people have to maybe not go through a plane crash, but something has to happen
Please don't.
Yeah, it's not the ideal way to step back from your business and let the systems run, right?
0 out of 10. Yeah, 0 out of 10, do not recommend.
Yeah. And unfortunately, that was your circumstance. I had chills as you were talking about your husband having trained someone and just the synchronicity of that and being prepared to be able to take a step back and how that impacted. And I also want to point out how powerful it is. You put a lot of years and blood, sweat, and tears into building something to be able to be in a position where you can step back. And I think social media or perception marketing has done such a good job of selling us this story of being able to start a business and retire early and just have this laptop lifestyle, this luxury. And so often it's not the case until you've put in so much of that effort and you've built those systems, have a viable product. So I love that you're at the space that you are now. That also has to come through a lot of effort.
Yes. I think too, my kids will be the first ones to tell you because they watched it so closely, and there's like being a mom, you have like mom guilt, like, oh, I didn't spend enough time doing this or I didn't do this, and I obviously have a lot of that through the years of working so much. But then I watch my kids and I would say they're really hard workers. And I'm like, I feel like they learned that from watching me and they watch and they're so grateful to everything Beddy's has brought because they were part of it. I mean, like we would go in on Black Friday and it was a whole family thing. We were all shipping through the whole like Christmas season, they would come in after school and help us ship and weekends. And so they were a part of it too. And so they see what it takes, that it's not just like, okay, you have an idea, start it and get rich,
Yeah, it takes a lot of effort. So let's talk about that generational impact too, because you have kids that are very entrepreneurial themselves, right? They've kind of taken that torch and learned a lot of those lessons. Let's pretend we're having a conversation with them 10 years ago, even just to benefit our audience. What are some of the top things that you would want old Betsy to know or your kids to know and our listeners to know about the journey of building a business?
Gosh, I think it's like, first and foremost, it's like, I think you have to kind of do everything to learn how everything works and to understand what you're hiring people for. And then also, when you hire people who are smarter than you. I think people sometimes get intimidated by that, but I'm like, to me, I want to hire someone who's smarter and better at those things than me for sure. Like they're only going to make the business better, And so I'm not like my business partner. A lot of people think there's like jealousy or they're like, how is there not any jealousy or competitiveness between you? I'm like, oh my gosh, heck no, because like she's way smarter than me. Like I couldn't do any of the things she does in business and she feels the same way about me. It's like we're so appreciative of each other's strengths. So also it's like, so maybe that's it too, is like try to do everything that you can. You've got to be involved in so many things in the beginning, but also like don't let your pride get in there and like don't be embarrassed that you need help or because I think a lot of times too, people don't want to admit that they need help. And then that's when they fail a little bit more,
Yeah. What was your support system? Like, I know you mentioned a lot of people came in and helped you in building this and your lifestyle had to change, right? Because you were already doing hair. That was a full-time thing in and of itself. You have children at home. You had to leave a lot of conveniences or luxuries behind to build something that now obviously you have a lot of those things anyway. But what did that support look like in terms of relationships? And it sounds like you had really great supportive parents, but what were some of the other key factors that you would say led to you being able to succeed with this long term?
I think it was a husband, like Gentry, he was so supportive with everything. Like if he needed to pick up the slack with the kids or my parents or his parents, helped out at school or picked kids up for things, like everyone's in on it, And I remember like even my business partner, every time we'd have to write a check to Beddy's, like here we are starting a business and we're still writing checks to Beddy's so that Beddy's can pay for things. And every time she's like, are you still okay with this? Like, are you ready to pay that next check? And he's like, I think we still do it, So it's like, it was a constant, like, are we still good with moving forward? And all of us continually were, and it was cool because, I worked with influencers a ton in the beginning and that's kind of how my kids got involved. So early on, we wanted to work with Mindy McKnight, who's Cute Girls Hairstyle at the time, the YouTube channel. And we didn't have enough money to pay her fees. And so she owns a small part of Beddy's. Well, my kids, like my daughter, watched her hair channel all growing up too, to learn how to do her braids and all the things. And then my kids saw those things too. And then they ended up starting their own YouTube channel. And I was like, I remember thinking like, oh, nobody cares about what these kids have to say, but at least you're staying entertained. But then they grew their social channels and now they're sharing about Beddy's on their social channels. So it's kind of like this cool little cycle or circle of life,
Yeah.
I don't know. It's kind of fun.
That's awesome. And it sounds like when there's something special about stepping into, you might have to leave some things behind, like I said, but you grow a new circle and you grow a new network. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times when you're able to do that and you're collaborating with people who are also at the same stages of building a business, who may be a lot further along than you, and you have that opportunity to collaborate, the ripple effect to that is never ending. I know I'm still being blessed from connections I made and the efforts of just putting myself out there 10 years ago today.
Yeah.
So it's a huge benefit to tapping into whatever support you can find. And I love hearing that as a mom too, that you can look at the mom guilt and say, oh, I worked so much and I was outside the home and I was doing this and this. Your kids have learned skills and they've built connections in a network. And that's one of my dreams as a mom, like leave them with so much more opportunity than I had so they can take that and run with it. So it's really cool to hear that.
Yeah. And do you know what's cool too is like, I remember in the beginning, I was like, when I had these influencers share Beddy's and I'm just like, oh my gosh, if I ever get a following, like I want to share other small businesses. And so that's kind of like, so now I have a personal Instagram following. And so now I'm able to share these small businesses that I love that have some cool ideas that I'm like, oh, they just need people to know about it.
Yeah.
It's cool in that way too.
Yeah.
So
I love that. That's so amazing. So your entrepreneurial spirit has carried on. You've stepped back a little bit from Beddy's and you're still out there. Now you're in the role of being the influencer to multiple products, which is so great. And I know a lot of people love following along your journey. So with that being said, you've given us so much to think about and knowledge, and it's cool to hear where you started, where you are now. How can people follow you if they want to keep watching your journey unfold?
Oh, thank you. On Instagram, it's Betsy Mikesell is my personal Instagram. And then we have another one for Beddy's and it's Beddy's BEDDYS. So those two places you can follow along if you want to hear more.
Cool. I love it. And I can personally vouch for Betsy and Beddy's. They're both fantastic. I appreciate you sharing your story with us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Anytime. Anything else you want to leave with everybody before we say goodbye?
Do you know what I think is find the good in your journey? Like always have gratitude for the good things, because the more you look for the good, the more you'll find. Like if you're constantly thinking of like what went wrong, what failed, you're going to find more of it. So like you'll find what you're looking for. So I think if you look for the good, it just keeps your journey in a better trajectory to be more grateful.
Yeah, I love that. Good advice. Appreciate you so much. Again, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Anytime you have an idea and you're trying to decide if it's actually worth anything and if it could amount to anything, I want you to remember today's episode with Betsy and recognize you could be sitting on your $1 million business right now. Look around you at the problems that you currently solve and see if there's other people who might need that solution as well. And then do what Betsy did. Just take the next step and the next step after that and figure things out as you go without trying to overwhelm yourself, having all of the answers right at the very beginning. I love stories like this where businesses are born out of actual need instead of just trying to sit there and come up with a business idea. Just pay attention. Be aware of what your talents are, what your gifts are, what your problems are, and if there's new ways that you could solve them. Thank you so much again, Betsy, for coming on and sharing your story and the story of Beddy's. I hope you guys got tons of value out of today's episode. Make sure you're subscribed to the podcast. Go leave us a rating and review and let us know what you're enjoying about the show and what you want to hear more of. And until the next one, class is officially dismissed.